In a sterile hospital room, a young man was about to discover the true cost of blind devotion. What started as a routine recovery took a shocking turn when he came face to face with the woman he'd given everything to. Her fingers wrapped around his oxygen tube. Ethan Lynn wasn't your typical wealthy heir. For 2 years, he had spent his life pouring his fortune into what he believed was love. Known for his generous heart and unwavering loyalty to those he cared about, when he encountered Seraphine's cold whisper, "You were never supposed to wake up," he had no idea he was walking into a second chance at life itself. Ethan would awaken not just from near death, but from 5 years in the past, armed with the devastating knowledge that would lead to his complete transformation. What began as a relationship built on financial dependency would become a journey of rebirth and redemption. The university campus would never be the same after he chose to rewrite his destiny, trading a love that was bought and paid for to discover what it meant to be truly chosen. If stories of second chances, the courage to see truth through deception, and finding real love after betrayal speak to your heart, make sure you subscribe, because this tale of rebirth will challenge everything you believe about love, money, and the price of genuine connection. The steady beeping of machines pulled me from the darkness. The steady beeping of machines pulled me from the darkness. I opened my eyes to fluorescent lights, harsh, clinical, unforgiving. My throat burned like I'd been screaming, but I couldn't remember making a sound. The last thing I remembered was Seraphine's face hovering over mine in that hospital bed, her fingers wrapped around my oxygen tube. "You were never supposed to wake up," she had whispered, her voice cold as winter rain. "Kai is waiting for me." Then, nothing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But this wasn't the same hospital room. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow instead of sterile white. A desk lamp cast warm light over textbooks scattered across a wooden surface. My textbooks, my desk, my dorm room. I sat up slowly, my head spinning. The calendar on my wall read, March 15th, 2019, 5 years ago. 5 years before that car accident that left me fighting for my life while the woman I loved pulled the plug. "This is impossible," I whispered to the empty room. But the evidence was everywhere. My old laptop, the same crack running down its left corner. The photo of Seraphina and me from last semester's winter formal. Her smile bright and fake as always, though I hadn't seen it then. The acceptance letter from Lynn Group's internship program dated for this summer. I was 22 again, a naive, wealthy young man who thought love could be bought with generosity and loyalty earned through sacrifice. My phone buzzed. A text from Seraphina. "Where are you? I'm waiting at the coffee shop." "Don't keep me waiting too long, baby." Baby. She used to call me that when she wanted something. In my previous life, I'd thought it meant she loved me. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then got dressed with movements that felt both foreign and familiar. The mirror showed me a face I'd forgotten, younger, softer, unmarked by the cynicism that would come later. But my eyes held knowledge that didn't belong to a 22-year-old. The campus was exactly as I remembered. Students hurrying between classes, couples holding hands under blooming cherry trees, the eternal queue at the library's coffee cart. Everything looked the same, but I felt like I was watching it all through bulletproof glass. I found Seraphina at our usual corner table, her laptop open to what looked like a business plan. She glanced up when I approached, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Calculation, maybe, or impatience. "You're 20 minutes late," she said without looking up from her screen. "Traffic," I lied, sliding into the seat across from her. She finally closed the laptop and gave me her full attention. Seraphina was beautiful, that hadn't changed. Dark hair that caught the light, delicate features, eyes that could look innocent or sultry depending on what she needed. I'd fallen for those eyes once. They'd been the last thing I saw before I died. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, leaning forward. "It's about my father." Of course it was. It was always about her father, or her family's debt, or some crisis that required my immediate financial intervention. In my previous life, I'd been so eager to play the hero that I'd never questioned why the crises never seemed to end. "What about him?" I asked, though I already knew. Her father's kidney disease was getting worse. The treatment was expensive. She needed money. "The doctor says he needs to move to a better facility, somewhere with round-the-clock care." Her voice cracked slightly, a masterful performance. "I don't know what to do, Ethan. We can't afford it, and I can't lose him." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold, her grip just tight enough to seem desperate without being uncomfortable. I remembered this exact moment from my previous life. I'd written a check for 200,000 yuan that afternoon. "How much?" I asked quietly. Relief flooded her features. "I don't have to. How much, Seraphina?" 300,000? For the first year." I nodded slowly, watching her face. In my previous life, I'd been moved by her tears, by the way she'd tried to refuse my help before reluctantly accepting it. Now I could see the calculation behind her performance, the way she'd already mentally spent the money before I'd even agreed to give it. "I'll transfer it tomorrow," I said. She squeezed my hand. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." I smiled, but it felt like wearing a mask. "What would you do without me?" "I'd figure something out. I always do." She paused, then added, "But I'm grateful I don't have to." The honesty in that statement cut deeper than any lie would have. She'd figure something out. She'd find another sponsor, another fool willing to bankroll her family's medical expenses. In exchange for her company, I'd just been convenient. After she left for her afternoon class, I sat in the coffee shop and made a phone call. "Dr. Mei Lin, it's Ethan Lin. I need to schedule a checkup." Dr. Mei Lin had been my family's physician for as long as I could remember. She'd also been the one to pronounce my time of death in my previous life, though I'd never learned that. Until now. Her office was in the same building as always, but seeing her again felt surreal. She was younger than I remembered, her hair still more black than silver, her movements sharp and efficient. "You look troubled," she said after taking my vitals. "Everything at school all right? Dr. Mei, have you ever felt like you were living your life wrong? Like you were making the same mistakes over and over?" She set down her stethoscope and studied me with those keen eyes. "That's a philosophical question for a medical appointment. Are you sleeping well? Eating regularly? I'm fine physically. But I keep thinking about choices, about whether people can really change or if they're just programmed to repeat the same patterns." "People can change," she said firmly, "but they have to want to. They have to be willing to face uncomfortable truths about themselves." She paused. "Is this about a girl?" I laughed despite myself. "Is it that obvious? You're 22? And asking about life patterns? It's either a girl or an existential crisis, and you seem too grounded for the latter. What if you discovered that someone you loved had been using you? That everything you thought was real was just performance?" Dr. Mei Lin was quiet for a long moment. Then you'd have to decide what to do with that knowledge. If you could use it to protect yourself, or you could use it to hurt them. Either way, you'd have to live with your choice. That night, I stood on my dorm room balcony and looked out at the campus lights. Somewhere out there, Seraphina was probably working on her laptop, planning her next move. Somewhere else, Aurora Jiang was studying in the library, as she did every night. Aurora, I'd barely noticed her in my previous life, even though we'd shared 3 classes together. She was the quiet girl who always sat in the second row, who turned in perfect assignments, but never spoke unless called upon. I remembered her asking thoughtful questions that made professors pause and think. I remembered her helping a struggling classmate with calculus problems after class, refusing payment or even thanks. I'd been so focused on Seraphine's drama that I'd missed someone who was genuinely kind. My phone buzzed. Another text from Seraphina. "Thank you for today. You're amazing. I love you."
Oh.
Tomorrow, I would begin testing whether anything between us had ever been real. But tonight, I wanted to remember what it felt like to hope. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I bought Seraphina a book instead of jewelry. It was a small thing, a collection of poems by Beidao that I'd noticed her reading once. The cover was worn from handling, and it cost less than what I usually spent on her coffee. When I found her in the library, she looked up from her laptop with the expectant smile I'd grown to recognize. I brought you something, I said, setting the book on the table between us. Her smile faltered slightly as she picked it up, turning it over in her hands. Oh, it's nice. Thank you. I remembered you reading it last month. You seemed to enjoy it. I did. She set it aside and reached for my hand. But you don't have to buy me things, right? Not with you for your money. The words would have meant something if she hadn't immediately followed them with, speaking of which, did you talk to your bank about the transfer? I did. The money should be in your account by tomorrow afternoon. Relief flickered across. Her features real relief, not the performed gratitude she'd shown for the book. Thank you. I can't tell you how much this means to me. I watched her slide the book into her bag without opening it. In my previous life, I'd given her a diamond bracelet that same day. She'd worn it constantly, posted photos of it on social media, made sure everyone knew it was from me. The book would probably end up forgotten in her bag, unread and unappreciated. I have to go, she said, standing and kissing my cheek. Vanessa wants to go shopping, and I promised I'd help her pick out something for her date tonight. After she left, I stayed in the library. It was quieter here than in my dorm, and I needed to think. But as I pulled out my laptop, I noticed someone at the table across from mine. Aurora Jiang sat with a stack of books beside her, taking notes in handwriting so neat it looked like typography. Her long black hair fell like a curtain around her face, and she was completely absorbed in whatever she was reading. I found myself studying her. She was beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention, the kind of beauty that revealed itself gradually, like a photograph developing. Her movements were economical, graceful. She wore a simple white sweater and jeans, no jewelry, except small pearl earrings that caught the light when she moved her head. As I watched, a freshman approached her table, clutching a textbook and looking lost. Aurora looked up and smiled, real smile, warm and immediate. She gestured to the empty chair beside her, and for the next 20 minutes, she patiently explained some concept I couldn't hear from my table. When the freshman finally left, looking relieved and grateful, Aurora returned to her work as if nothing had happened. She didn't take a photo for social media or text anyone about her good deed. She'd just helped someone because they needed help. I remembered something from my previous life. After I'd gotten engaged to Seraphina, Aurora had transferred to study. Abroad, she'd left in the middle of the semester, sudden and without explanation. I'd barely noticed at the time. Now I wondered if she'd left because of me. Are you going to keep staring, or are you going to come over here? I looked up, startled. Aurora was looking directly at me, her expression amused rather than annoyed. I'm sorry, I said, gathering my things. I didn't mean to. It's fine. You looked like you were working up the courage to say something. She gestured to the empty chair the freshman had vacated. Was I right? I sat down, feeling oddly nervous. I wanted to thank you. For what? You helped me with the economics assignment last week. You probably don't remember, but you caught an error in my calculations. I remember. She closed her book and gave me her full attention. You? Looked like you were going to throw your laptop across the room. I was considering it. She laughed a soft, genuine sound. That would have been expensive destruction therapy. Sometimes expensive is worth it. Something shifted in her expression. I suppose it is when you can afford it. There was no bitterness in her voice, just a statement of fact. But I felt the weight of it anyway. Aurora came from money her. Family's company was almost as large as mine, but she'd never used wealth as a weapon or a shield. I didn't mean it like that, I said. I know. She reopened her book. Your girlfriend is Seraphina Lee, right? The question caught me off. Guard. Yes. Why? No reason. You two seem suited to each other. There was something in her tone I couldn't quite identify. It's not jealousy exactly, but something more complex. I found myself wanting to explain, to tell her that things weren't what they seemed, that I was beginning to understand the difference between love and transaction. Instead, I said, "What are you reading?" She held up the book, The Art of War. For class, for interest. Sun Tzu had some interesting thoughts about knowing yourself and knowing your enemy. And which are you trying to figure out? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Both, I think. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both working on our respective assignments. It was peaceful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. With Seraphina, every interaction felt like a performance, every conversation a negotiation. With Aurora, I could just be. When I finally left the library, I realized I hadn't thought about Seraphina once during those 2 hours. That evening, I received a text from Seraphina at dinner with Vanessa. She says, "You've been acting strange lately. Are you okay?" I stared at the message, then typed back, "I'm fine. Just thinking about things." What things? I could have written the script for this conversation. She'd probe until I reassured her, until I told her everything was perfect between us. Then she'd be satisfied until the next time my behavior deviated from her expectations. Instead, I turned off my phone and went to bed early. 2 weeks later, I executed the first real test of my new life. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I knew exactly where to find Seraphina. She'd be in the campus courtyard with Vanessa, holding court at one of the picnic tables while other students pretended not to eavesdrop on their conversation. She loved an audience, especially when she was about to receive something expensive. In my previous life, this was the day I'd given her a 30 million won pink diamond ring. She'd been so excited she'd practically leaped across the table to kiss me. The entire courtyard had erupted in applause, and within an hour, photos of the ring had spread across social media. This time, I carried the same ring box, but my intentions were entirely different. I found her exactly where I expected, surrounded by the usual crowd of admirers and hangers-on. She spotted me approaching, and her face lit up with anticipation. I'd been subtly distant for weeks, and she'd been trying to regain my attention with increasingly desperate gestures. "Then," she called out, standing and smoothing her skirt. What a surprise. I could see the excitement in her eyes as she noticed the velvet box in my hand. The crowd around us grew quiet, sensing drama. "I brought you something," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She stepped closer, her smile brilliant. "You didn't have to, actually," I interrupted. "I want to make something clear first." The courtyard fell silent. Even the birds seemed to pause their chirping. I've been thinking about what love means, about what it means to choose someone, and what it means to be chosen. I looked directly at her. I've been thinking about whether love can exist where there's no genuine choice. Seraphine's smile wavered. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you've never once told me you loved me without following it with a request for money." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Seraphine's face went pale, then flushed red. "That's not true," she whispered. "Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Isn't it? 300,000 for your father's treatment? 50,000 for your emergency? Tuition when you knew it was already paid? 20,000 for your friend's medical bills? Another 100,000 for your business idea that never materialized? The numbers hung in the air like accusations. I could see people in the crowd exchanging glances, putting pieces together. "I never asked for any of that, Seraphina," said her voice rising. "You offered." "I did. And every time you took it. You never said no, never suggested I was giving too much, never offered to pay me back when your situation's improved." I held up the ring box. "This ring cost 30 million yuan. My previous timeline, you would have accepted it without question. You would have worn it like a trophy." "Previous timeline?" Vanessa stepped forward, her expression confused. "What are you talking about?" I ignored her, keeping my focus on Seraphina. "But you know what? I don't think you deserve it. I don't think you ever loved me at all. How can you say that?" Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "I've been with you for 2 years. No, you've been with my bank account for 2 years. There's a difference." I turned away from her and scanned the crowd until I found who I was looking for. Aurora stood near the back, her face a mask of confusion and discomfort. She'd been trying to leave, but the crowd had closed in around. "Her Aurora," I called out. She froze, looking like she wanted to disappear. "Come here, please." She shook her head, but I was already walking toward her. When I reached her, I knelt on one knee and opened the ring box. The pink diamond caught the afternoon sunlight and threw rainbows across the courtyard. Someone screamed. Several people started taking photos. Aurora Jang, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Will you do me the honor of being my girlfriend? She stared at me in shock, her mouth open. Behind me, I could hear Seraphina sobbing. I can't, Aurora whispered. Why not? Because this isn't real. This is some kind of game you're playing, and I won't be a prop in it. She turned and walked away, pushing through the crowd with determined grace. I watched her go, still kneeling, with the ring box open, and felt something I hadn't expected. Respect. In my previous life, I'd never met a woman who would turn down a 30-million-yuan ring. But Aurora had done it without hesitation, because she understood that expensive gestures without genuine feeling were just elaborate lies. I stood up, closed the ring box, and faced the crowd. That, I said, is what integrity looks like. Then I walked away, leaving Seraphina surrounded by her audience, crying alone despite being in a crowd of people. The next day I did something I'd never done before. I went to the hospital where Seraphine's father was being treated. In my previous life, I'd visited him dozens of times, bringing flowers and expensive fruit baskets, sitting by his bedside. While he thanked me for taking care of his daughter, he'd been a kind man, genuinely grateful for my help. Unaware that his daughter saw our relationship as a business transaction, this time I didn't visit his room. Instead, I sat in the hospital cafeteria and waited. At 2:30 p.m., exactly as I remembered, Seraphina arrived with Kai Xiao. Kai was everything I'd once been jealous of: tall, charismatic, with the kind of easy confidence that came from inherited wealth and natural charm. He was also, as I'd learned, too late, completely ruthless. I watched them from across the cafeteria, hidden behind a newspaper. Seraphina looked tired, her eyes red from crying. Kai leaned across the table and took her hand. I can't keep doing this, she was saying. Odd. Ethan humiliated me in front of everyone. He did you a favor, Kai replied. God. Now you can stop pretending to care about him. I do care about him. He's been good to me. He's been useful to you. It's a difference. I felt a cold satisfaction at hearing my suspicions confirmed, but it was mixed with something else's appointment. Even now, even after everything, part of me had hoped I was wrong. What am I supposed to do? Seraphina asked. My father needs that treatment, and I can't afford it without Ethan's help. You can afford it with mine. She looked up at him, hope and calculation warring in her expression. What do you mean? I mean, I'll pay for everything. Your father's treatment, your tuition, whatever you need. All you have to do is stop wasting time on a boy who doesn't appreciate you. And what would you want in return? Kai smiled, and I remembered that smile from my previous life. It was the same smile he'd worn when he'd convinced Seraphina to leave me, when he'd promised her a better life. It was the same smile he'd worn at our wedding, and he'd given a toast about young love while knowing he was planning to steal. My wife, I want you to be happy, he said. And I want you to be with someone who deserves you. Someone like you, someone exactly like me. I'd heard enough. I left the cafeteria and walked to the hospital's financial office. The administrator, Mrs. Chen, recognized me immediately. Mr. Lin, how can I help you today? I need to make a change to the payment arrangements for Mr. Li's treatment, I said. Of course. What kind of change? I want to remove myself as the financial guarantor, effective immediately. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from welcoming to concerned. Are you sure? Mr. Li's treatment is quite expensive, and without a guarantor, I'm sure. His daughter has found alternative funding. Sign the paperwork with a steady hand. In my previous life, I'd continued paying for her father's treatment even after she'd betrayed me, even after she'd chosen Kai over me. I'd told myself it was about compassion, about not punishing an innocent man for his daughter's choices. But really, it had been about hope. Hope that she'd see my continued generosity and realize what she'd lost. Hope that she'd come back too. Me. Now I understood that hope could be a poison as dangerous as any other drug. That evening, I received a frantic call from Seraphina. Ethan, please, I need to talk to you. The hospital called and said you removed the payment guarantee. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake. But my father, your father, will be fine. Your new boyfriend promised to take care of everything, didn't he? Silence on the other end of the line. How did you? I know a lot of things, Seraphina. I know you've been seeing Kai Zhao for months. I know you've been planning to leave me for him. I know you never loved me. That's not true. And prove it. Come to my apartment right now. Come alone, without calling Kai first, without asking him what to do. Prove that you chose me because you wanted to, not because you needed to. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. I can't, she whispered finally. I know, I said, and hung up. An hour later, I was sitting on my apartment balcony when I saw Aurora walking across campus. She moved with purpose, her bag slung over her shoulder, probably heading to the library for her evening study session. On impulse, I called out to her, Aurora, wait. She looked up, located my balcony, and stopped. Even from 3 stories up, I could see her expression of wariness. What do you want? She called back. I want to apologize for yesterday. You were right. It was a game, and I shouldn't have involved you. She stood there for a moment, then walked closer to the building. Why did you do it? She asked, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. Because I wanted to know if anyone would choose me for me, not for what I could give them. And what did you learn? I thought about Seraphine's silence on the phone, about her inability to choose me without consulting Kai first, about the way she'd never once in 2 years told me she loved me without following it with a request. I learned that some people are incapable of love. They're only capable of transaction. Aurora nodded slowly. And what are you going to do with that knowledge? I'm going to stop playing their game, I said. I'm going to find people who know the difference between love and business. She smiled, then the first real smile she'd ever given me. That sounds like a good plan, she said, and continued on her way to the library. I watched her go, and for the first time since my rebirth, I felt something like peace. The rain started just as I left my last class of the day. Fat droplets that turned into a steady downpour within minutes, sending students scrambling for cover under awnings and doorways. I'd forgotten my umbrella mistake, the old Ethan never would have made. But as I stood under the library's overhang, watching the water cascade down, I realized I didn't mind being caught unprepared. It felt honest somehow. You're going to catch pneumonia standing there like that? I turned to find Aurora beside me, holding a large black umbrella. Her hair was slightly damp from the run between buildings. She was looking at me with that mixture of amusement and concern I was starting to recognize. I'll survive, I said, probably. But there's no reason to test that theory? She held out the umbrella handle. Take it. I can wait for the rain to stop. I can't take your umbrella. You can and you will, unless you'd prefer to share it. The suggestion hung in the air between us. In my previous life, I would have politely declined and gotten soaked walking back to my dorm. But this wasn't my previous life. I'd like that, I said. We stepped out into the rain together, the umbrella creating a small pocket of dryness around us. Aurora was shorter than me, which meant I had to hunch slightly to stay under the canopy. Our shoulders bumped as we walked, and I caught the faint scent of her shampoos, something clean and simple like jasmine, she said as we navigated around a particularly large puddle. Everyone's been talking about what happened in the courtyard yesterday. I imagine they have. Some people think you've lost your mind. Others think Seraphina had it coming. She glanced up at me. What do you think? I think I finally started seeing clearly. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the rain drumming against the umbrella fabric. When we reached the fork in the path where we'd normally separate her toward the graduate dormitories, me toward the undergraduate complex, Aurora stopped. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Why me? Yesterday with the ring? Could have chosen anyone in that crowd, but you chose me. Why? I looked down at her, at the honest curiosity in her dark eyes, and felt something shift. Inside my chest? Because you're the only person I know who would turn down a 30 million yuan ring? That's not an answer, that's an observation. She was right. Took a breath, trying to find words for something I'd only just begun to understand myself. Because in 2 years of watching you in classes, I've never seen you be anything other than genuinely kind. You help people without expecting credit. You ask questions because you want to learn, not because you want to impress the professor. You turned down my ring because you understood it wasn't really meant for you. I paused. I chose you because you're real, Aurora, and I'm tired of surrounding myself with people who aren't. She was quiet for so long I thought I'd said too much. Then she smiled, not the polite social smile I'd seen her use with classmates, but something softer and more personal. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, she said. Really? Really? Most people see me as the quiet girl who studies too much and doesn't know how to have fun. Maybe they're not looking hard enough. We stood there under the umbrella, rain falling around us like a curtain that separated us from the rest of the world. I felt a peace I'd forgotten was possible, the simple contentment of being with someone who didn't want anything from me except my honest company. I should go, Aurora said finally. I have a study group in an hour. Of course you do. She handed me the umbrella. Keep it. I have another one upstairs. Aurora, thank you for what you said. It means more than you know. She ran toward her dormitory, her bag held over her head for protection. I watched until she disappeared through the glass doors, then stood alone under her umbrella, feeling like something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of what I wanted from life. The next morning brought the first real consequence of my public rejection of Seraphina. I was having breakfast in the campus dining hall when she appeared at my table, flanked by Vanessa and two other girls from their social circle. We need to talk, Seraphina announced, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. I didn't look up from my newspaper. I think we've said everything we need to say. You humiliated me in front of the entire school. I told the truth. In front of the entire school? That humiliated you? Maybe you should examine why. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Everyone knows you're just having some kind of breakdown. It's actually kind of sad watching you lash out like this. I finally looked up. Vanessa was beautiful in an obvious way, the kind of beauty that required constant maintenance and attention. She'd been Seraphine's best friend for as long as I'd known them. Always ready with flattery when Seraphina received expensive gifts, and sympathy when she complained about my expectations. Tell me, Vanessa, I said conversationally, how many times have you borrowed money from Seraphina? Money that she got from me? Her perfectly made-up face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. The designer bag you're carrying. Right now, the one that cost 8,000 yuan, Seraphina bought it for you last month, didn't she? Called it an early birthday present? Seraphina shot a sharp look at Vanessa, who was now fidgeting with the bag strap. And the vacation? To Sonia, you took over spring break. Who paid for that? That's none of your business, Vanessa snapped. It became my business when the money came from my account. I stood up, gathering my things. See, that's the funny thing about being the source of funding for this little ecosystem. You get to see exactly how loyalty works when it's purchased, rather than earned. I walked away, leaving them at the table. But I could hear Vanessa's voice rising behind me. Don't look at me like that, Sera. You never told me he was keeping track. That afternoon, I was in the library when Aurora approached my table. She looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure she should interrupt. Is everything okay? She asked, settling into the chair across from me. Why do you ask? Because you look like you're planning someone's murder. I realized I'd been gripping my pen hard enough to leave marks on the paper. Just thinking about the nature of friendship? Bad thoughts? Realistic thoughts? I set down the pen and looked at her. Can I ask you something? Do you think loyalty can be bought? Aurora considered the question seriously.
I think
you can buy the appearance of loyalty. But real loyalty, the kind that lasts when things get difficult, that has to be earned through respect and genuine care. And how can you tell the difference? Time, she said simply. Real loyalty doesn't disappear when the benefits do. As if summoned by our conversation, Seraphina appeared in my peripheral vision. She was walking quickly toward our table, her face flushed with anger. There you are, she said, stopping in front of us. I've been looking everywhere for you. I'm studying, I said without looking up. With her. Seraphine's voice carried enough venom to poison the air around us. Aurora started to stand. I should go now, I said firmly. You shouldn't, This is a public library, and you have as much right to be here as anyone else. Seraphine's eyes flashed. I need to talk to you privately. Then make an appointment. Right now, I'm busy. Busy with what? Pretending she's some kind of replacement for me? The cruelty in her voice made something cold settle in my stomach. I stood slowly, and for the first time in our relationship, I saw Seraphina take a step back. Aurora isn't a replacement for anyone, I said quietly. She's her own person, with her own worth, and she doesn't need to be compared to you or anyone else. How noble, Seraphina sneered. Defending your new girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. She's my friend. I realize that's a concept you might not understand since you've never been anyone's friend without expecting payment. Seraphine's face crumpled, but I felt no satisfaction in her tears. Only a tired sadness for the person I'd thought she was. She turned and fled, leaving Aurora and me alone in the sudden quiet. I'm sorry, I said after a moment. Shouldn't have had to witness that. I'm not sorry, Aurora replied. I'm glad I saw how you handle cruelty, some people respond. To meanness by being mean back. You chose to be kind instead. I looked at her looked at her hand, saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen in Seraphine's. It's admiration that wasn't based on what I could give her, but on who I chose to be when things got difficult. For the first time since my rebirth, I felt like I might be becoming someone worth admiring. My parents had been unusually insistent about the family dinner. When Director Lin and his wife requested your presence, it wasn't really a request. It was a command wrapped in politeness. I arrived at the family estate to find them waiting in the formal dining room, dressed in their usual armor of expensive clothes and practiced expressions. But there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Sit down, Ethan, my father said without preamble. We need to discuss your recent behavior. I took my seat across from them, noting the way my mother's lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. There have been rumors, she began delicately. About what? About you ending your relationship with Seraphina Lee in a very public manner. Those aren't rumors, they're facts. My father leaned forward. Son, I understand that young relationships can be volatile, but the way you handled this situation lacks discretion. Discretion, the Lee family, despite their current financial difficulties, has connections that could be valuable too. Our business interests, humiliating their daughter publicly, reflects poorly on our family's judgment. I stared at them, finally understanding what this dinner was really about. You want me to apologize to her? We want you to repair the relationship, my mother said. Seraphina is a beautiful girl from a respectable family. With our support, she could become an excellent wife. It's an excellent wife for whom? For you, obviously. The casualness with which they discussed my future, my heart, my choices struck me like a physical blow. My previous life, I'd eventually bowed to this pressure. I'd married Seraphina because it made business sense, because it looked good in the society pages, because it was what was expected. What if I don't want to marry her? My father's expression hardened. What you want is irrelevant. You're the heir to Lin Group. Your personal desires come second to family responsibility, and if I choose differently, then you choose unwisely. The threat was clear, even unspoken. Conform or be disinherited. Play the role or lose everything that came with the Lin name. Actually, I said, standing up, I've invited someone to join us for dinner. I hope you don't mind. My parents exchanged glances, The doorbell rang before I could answer. A moment later, the housekeeper appeared in the doorway. Miss Aurora Zhang is here to see you, young master. I watched my parents' faces carefully as Aurora entered the dining room. She wore a simple navy dress and pearl earrings, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon. She looked elegant, without trying to impress, confident without being arrogant. Aurora, I said, standing to greet her, thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet my parents. She bowed politely. Mr. Lin, Mrs. Lin, thank you for including me in your family dinner. My mother's smile was razor-sharp. How lovely. And how do you know our son? We're classmates at university and friends. Friends, my father repeated, as if testing the word's taste. The dinner that followed was a masterclass in polite warfare. My parents asked Aurora pointed questions about her family background, her future plans, her intentions regarding their son. Aurora answered each one with grace and honesty, never defensive, but never apologetic for who she was. "Your family is in finance, I believe?" my mother asked over the soup course. "Yes. Zhang Financial Group." "Ah, yes. I know your father. Capable man, though perhaps not as established as certain families," she said, the slight curl of her lip betraying the insult laced in her words. It was a deliberate jab meant to remind Aurora of her place. Aurora didn't flinch. She simply nodded.
I
"Always said it's more meaningful to build something of your own than to inherit someone else's legacy. He believes you value things more when you've earned them." "How?" "Quaint," came the dry reply. I watched as Aurora met my parents' thinly veiled condescension with quiet grace. She didn't take the bait, didn't try to impress them with grand names or accomplishments. She didn't need to, simply held her own calm and unapologetically herself. As the final course was cleared, my father turned to me. "Ethan, perhaps you'd like to show Miss Jiang the garden while your mother and I handle some family matters." It was a dismissal cloaked in politeness, but unmistakably a dismissal. "Actually," setting down my glass, "Aurora is family business. She's the woman I plan to marry." The silence that followed was sharp enough to hear the grandfather. "Clock ticking in the hallway? Excuse me?" my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to propose to Aurora. I brought her here as a courtesy, not a request." "Your approval isn't necessary." Across the table, Aurora blinked clearly. "Just as surprised as my parents, Ethan," my father said carefully. "You're 22. You don't know what you're doing." "I know what I don't want," I said firmly. "I don't want a marriage built on convenience or expectation. I don't want a partner who sees me as a credit line with a pulse. I want someone who would still be beside me, even if I had nothing." I glanced at Aurora, whose expression was unreadable. "I want someone who loved me before she knew my last name, who refuses expensive gifts because she knows they're empty without love behind them. Someone who helps others simply because it's the right thing to do." My mother's face had gone pale. "This is absurd. You hardly know this girl." "Know her better than you to know each other after 3 decades. The words landed with a weight I couldn't take back. Their marriage had always been transactional efficient, yes, but never affectionate. It was a partnership, not a love. Aurora stood up abruptly. "I think I should leave." "No," I said, standing too. "We should both leave. Together." As we neared the front door, my father called out behind us, "If you leave now, don't expect to come back." I turned one last time to face the people who gave me life, but never taught me how to live. "I understand," I said. "Goodbye." The drive was quiet. 20 minutes passed in stillness before Aurora broke the silence. "Pull over." I eased the car into a spot outside a small cafe and turned off the engine. Aurora sat staring out the windshield, hands tightly clasped in her lap. "What the hell was that?" she asked, her voice low. "That was me choosing you over them." "No," she said sharply. "That was you using me to make a statement." The words hit hard. "That's not fair, isn't it? You just told your parents you were marrying me, without ever asking me what I wanted. You dragged me into your personal rebellion without my permission." She turned toward me, and the look in her eyes stopped me cold. "I thought you were different," she said, "but you're still just another rich boy who thinks good intentions give him the right to make decisions for other people." I leaned back in the seat, the truth settling heavily around me. She was right. In my desperation to break free from their control, I'd tried to take control of her instead. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm sorry. I was so busy trying not to repeat my parents' mistakes that I created new ones." She hesitated. "What mistakes?" I looked at her, Ellie looked at her. I knew what I had to say next, even though it scared me to the core. "Aurora, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound completely insane. But I need you to listen, because it's the only way I can explain why I've been acting so strangely." Over the next hour, sitting in my car outside that little cafe, I told her everything. About my previous life, about dying and being reborn, about watching the woman I'd loved choose money over me again and again. I told her about the loneliness of loving someone who was incapable of loving me back, about the realization that I'd been paying for companionship and calling it romance. Aurora listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from skepticism to concern to something like understanding. "So," she said when I finished, "you're either completely insane or you're telling me the truth about something impossible." I know how it sounds. Actually, it explains a lot. It's the way you knew exactly how Seraphina would react to things. The way you seemed to be testing her instead of trusting her. The way you looked at me like you were seeing me for the first time, even though we'd been in classes together for 2 years. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. "If this is true," she said finally, "then you know how this story ends. You know whether I say yes if you actually ask me to marry." "You know," I said. "In my previous life, you transferred schools before I had a chance to really know you. This is uncharted territory for both of us." "Good," she said, surprising me. "Because I don't want to be with someone who already knows all my answers." "Want to be with someone who's interested in discovering them?" Hope fluttered in my chest. "Does that mean? It means you should ask me properly? Not as a way to rebel against your parents, not as part of some grand gesture, but because you genuinely want to know my answer." I turned in my seat to face her fully. "Aurora Jiang, would you like to go on a date with me? A real date, where we talk about things that matter, and I don't try to impress you with expensive restaurants or gifts?" She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her all evening. I would like that very much. 3 months later, I planned the proposal I should have planned the first time. It wasn't in a crowded courtyard with an audience of strangers. It wasn't designed to prove a point or win an argument. It was in Aurora's favorite place on campuses, small garden behind the library where she liked to read when the weather was nice. I'd arranged for fairy lights to be strung between the trees, not because they were expensive, but because Aurora had once mentioned that she thought they looked like captured stars. I'd asked Dr. Mei Lin to be there, not as a witness to wealth, but as someone who'd watched me grow from a boy who tried to buy love into a man who was learning to earn it. Aurora arrived at sunset, wearing the same navy dress she'd worn to dinner with my parents. She looked beautiful, but more importantly, she looked happy. "You've been planning something?" she said, as she took in the lights and the small table set for 2. "Yeah. But first, I need to give you something." I handed her an envelope instead of a ring box. Inside was a letter I'd written the night after I'd told her about my rebirth, a letter explaining everything I'd learned about love and loss, about the difference between choosing someone and settling for them, about the fear and hope that came with loving someone who could say no. She read it in the fading light, tears gathering in her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered when she finished. "Aurora, I've learned that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. It's about wanting to be better because they deserve better. It's about trusting someone with your heart because you know they'll treat it carefully." I knelt down, but instead of a ring, I held out a simple origami crane made from sheet music, a piece by Chopin that she'd once hummed while studying. I made this myself. It took me 17 tries to get the folds right, and it's worth maybe 50 cents in materials. But it represents hours of my time and thought, and the hope that someday you might want to build something beautiful with me. She laughed through her tears, taking the paper crane with careful hands. "Will you marry me, Aurora?" "Because it makes sense financially. Not because our families approve, but because you want to wake up next to me for the rest of your life." "Yes," she said, and her smile was brighter than all the fairy lights combined. "Yes, I'll marry you." Dr. Mei Lin emerged from behind the trees, applauding softly. "That," she said, "is how you propose to someone you actually love." The engagement party was small and private, just our closest friends and Aurora's family. My parents hadn't spoken to me since the dinner, but I'd learned that their approval was a burden I no longer needed to carry. We were halfway through the evening when Seraphina arrived. She looked terrible thin, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that had once been expensive, but now showed signs of wear. The confident girl who'd once commanded attention wherever she went had been replaced by someone desperate and broken. "I need to talk to you," she said, pushing through the small crowd to reach me. Aurora squeezed my hand. "I'll be right here," she said quietly, and stepped back to give us space while staying, close enough to intervene if needed. "Seraphina," I said carefully, "how did you find us?" "It doesn't matter. I came to tell you that you were wrong. About everything." The guest had grown quiet, sensing drama. "I did love you," she continued, her voice rising. "I loved you, and you threw it away for her. You threw away everything we had for someone who doesn't even know you like I do. And how do you know me, Seraphina? I know you're generous and kind. I know you care about people who are struggling. I know you want to help. You know I have money," I interrupted. "That's all you've ever known about me? You couldn't tell me my favorite book, or my biggest fear, or what I want to do with my life beyond inheriting my family's business. You never asked? That's not true. When's my birthday, Seraphina?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "What's my middle name? What did I study in high school that I was passionate about? What do I do when I can't sleep?" Each question hit like a physical blow. The crowd was staring now, but not at me, at her, as they realized what I was demonstrating. "You lived off my money for 2 years, I continued, my voice gentle, but firm. You wore my gifts, ate at restaurants I paid for, lived in comfort I provided. But you never once tried to know the person behind the bank account. I was grateful. Gratitude isn't love, Seraphina. And being taken care of isn't the same as being cherished." I looked at Aurora, who was watching the exchange with sad eyes. Aurora knows that I read mystery novels when I can't sleep. She knows I'm afraid of becoming like my parents, and that I want to build something meaningful instead of just inheriting wealth. She knows these things because she cared enough to ask, and because she listened to the answers. Seraphina followed, my gaze to Aurora, and something ugly twisted across her face. "You think you're so much better than me," she spat. "You, with your perfect family and your perfect life. You don't know what it's like to watch your father dying while you can't afford to save him. You don't know what it's like to be desperate." "You're right," Aurora said, stepping forward. "I don't know what that's like. But I know what it's like to love someone who might never love me back. And I know what it's like to want someone's happiness more than I want their money." "How noble," Seraphina sneered. "It's easy to be noble when you've never been poor. It's easy to be cruel when you've never been accountable," Aurora replied calmly. "Ethan offered you genuine care, and you turned it into a transaction. That wasn't about money, that was about choice." Seraphina looked around the room at the faces, watching her, some sympathetic, some judgmental, all aware that she'd lost something precious through her own decisions. "I hope you're happy," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I hope she gives you everything you think you deserve. I hope you find what you're really looking for," I replied. But I don't think it was ever me." She turned and left, and I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Not satisfaction or vindication, but simply the quiet relief of a chapter finally closing. Dr. Malin approached as the party resumed around us. "That was well handled," she said quietly. "Was it?" You didn't gloat. You didn't humiliate her. More than she'd already humiliated herself. You told the truth with compassion, and that's all anyone can do. Aurora slipped her hand into mine. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said, and realized I meant it. Later that night, as we sat on my apartment balcony looking out at the city lights, Aurora asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Do you think she'll be all right eventually? She's smart and determined. Once she learns to value herself for more than what others can give her, she'll find someone who appreciates who she actually is. And us? Do you think we'll be all right?" I turned to look at her, this woman who'd turned down diamonds but treasured origami, who'd seen me at my worst and chosen to stay anyway, who'd taught me the difference between being wanted and being needed. "I think we're going to be extraordinary," I said. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I believed it completely. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.